crazy over flag. You know, believe me, I know. Okay.
That's true.
Okay, and so what does it mean? Do we need it anymore? Is it relevant? You know, does it limit us just to a geographical psyche about who we are and whatnot and all that? I think that what Joy is saying is that there's value in at least making sure that there is a space for that. That's really the value that I think that the flag actually represents to some degree.
By your story, I can imagine that that day was an incredible day and a day of celebration and, you know, and a sense of power.
And not to say that there were questions even in doing that. I grew up in a religious household where we did not honor the American flag in terms of pledge of allegiance to it.
I just wonder what the sort of right temporal structure for that kind of celebration would be. You know, maybe there would be an annual, you know, commemoration of kind of great moments in queer life in San Francisco, and maybe we would light the streets of the Castro with 3,000 sparklers, and that could be very meaningful for us. It's something about the stabilization of that moment, and then really its size. That seems to stand for a different kind of energy than the one you're describing felt in that moment.
John, I just want to say one more thing. The thing that happens with the rainbow flag also, and I see that that's happened, is that it helps us find each other. And I think that's what the residents were saying that day. This helps us find each other.
Okay, Tito, I know we're going to move past the flag.
Also in Amsterdam recently, and mind you, the rainbow flag is not a Dutch system. They have a symbol, because some people were saying it's an American symbol, it's not for the gay movement in the Netherlands. So at one point even the city council there said we're not going to have rainbow flags up. And then also, so even though it was not a GLBT Dutch symbol, people were raising questions and go like, you know, what does it actually mean? Second thing I wanted to say, I saw other people trying to make a picture of themselves with the flag, you know, and it was like very high, and they're trying to do everything. And I also think, yeah, the size, I'm not sure, it's kind of funny to me. But my question actually for you, being an architect and also understanding probably the symbolism of building anything, what kind of structure would you then suggest if you would? You know, because dealing with architecture, you know, something that could benefit the gay community instead of the flag.
Well, that's a pretty complicated question.
I understand. That's why I asked.
I mean, if we're talking about urban structure and, you know, things people need to live well, that's a whole other kind of thing. But you know, perhaps this idea of sparklers.
So you're leaning against the glass, and I just don't want you to get murdered here.
You know, perhaps there's something in this beginning of an idea about sparklers, and something very ephemeral and charged, actually. And so, I mean, I think I'm trying to work through two different ideas of space. Space is kind of stable and contained and something that you take or somebody else takes and then you take back, but it's like this thing, and there are containers and there are ghettos and enclaves and countries and categories and so on. And space is something that's more like a verb, that's constantly in a kind of ongoing process of making and remaking and unmaking itself as life evolves. And in that sense, Susan, I was very moved by what you said, and this idea about kind of living in the moment and being open to it and working through all of the problems and pleasures that that we confront at this moment in our community, in our own lives, in our cultural development.
For the sake of getting more voices from the audience, let's take a few comments from the audience, and then we'll move forward from there. So let's go here, and then were you raising your hand in the back? Okay, and then over here, and then here, and then here. Okay, we'll go from there. All right, I promise. Go ahead.
Well, I'm hearing that what you're wanting is something more of a temporal thing, like okay, Christmas comes along and people decorate their houses and put trees up in their yard and with lights and blinking, everything. But then by New Year's or so, it's all taken down again. And you celebrated that whole thing about it. Well, maybe what you're saying is, okay, we can put these flags up, but let's just do it during Pride Week or something.
Okay, thanks.
Gee, I don't know where to start here. There's something on Animal Farm about the concept of branding that really bothers me. I always thought of liberation as the elimination of branding, but you know, my reference points on this have to do with whether we are geographically dispersed or concentrated, and regardless of what the particularities of the symbols are, all of the institutions, technologies, and structures through which our identity is mediated in order to create it as a public phenomenon, and whether the existence of those institutions is itself really a liberating phenomenon for human beings. I guess if anybody wants to address that somewhere along the line, there's a guy from Holland here, Tim Fortune. And on my way up here finally, I was talking to a friend who's in a nursing home. He just had back surgery. And I mentioned there were going to be people here from this elders community, and he wanted me to pick up some literature. And again, I was thinking, gee, is this Animal Farm, or is this another way to evolve and grow? There was a lot of scary stuff going on these days.
Thank you.
About 10 years ago, Henry was one of my guest reviewers at architecture school. Just as provocative as you were back then. Look what you started. A couple things I want to say. One is that I think a lot of people use the gay community when they're trying to meet someone and then they meet their partner. Sort of an interesting phenomenon. How can we keep people there, or what else can we offer for people who aren't just going to the bar to wrestle and tango and whatever? Another thing about San Francisco in general is that, you know, for such a small population of people in the city, there's a huge gay community, and I think that that's why we're even having this discussion, because we all know about it. In other cities like New York, you're sort of all over the place. Everyone's just living in a city. Here it's so much more of a picket fence neighborhood. We're all affected by everything. You see the same people out, and so everyone just knows about what's going on, and because of the geography of the city, everyone sort of falls into a valley, and here we are. But it's interesting that, again, another conversation is, I'm just throwing out a bunch of ideas, is that, again, historically, a gay community used to be sort of a safe place where you could be gay, then you could go back to your straight life, and now I think people are coexisting without having to be in a gay neighborhood. They can just be anywhere. I have friends who live all over the city. So,
yeah, I just think it's interesting that, you know, we have a discussion about kind of the future of queer neighborhoods, and yet the discussion is very much grounded in one particular past, and that particular past is the Castro as it existed for the last 25 years. And it's interesting because Dawn and I have done a lot together, and like the last 6 years of our lives have been in many ways defined as a reaction against the Castro. We did Guerrilla Queer Bar, where we took people to a lot of bars all over the city that were not in the Castro, so that we could have fun and make queer spaces out of places that were in places that were outside of the Castro. We then went back to the Castro, and I've spent more time there, I think, picketing one particular bar than I have doing anything else. And so it's interesting for me that as we talk about the future of queer neighborhoods, we are doing it with reference to a place that I don't relate to, that I don't go to, and that I don't necessarily feel comfortable in all the time. And I'm supposed to be the guy who feels comfortable there. And so if there's an opportunity to comment a little bit more, I would just ask any of the panelists or anybody else in the room who wants to comment, what is kind of the essential element of a queer space and a queer community, and is it necessarily that geographic concentration that exists in the Castro, or is it something else a little more ephemeral?